Coming up on a newscast, Seoul's top diplomat travels to Bali for the G20 foreign ministers meeting. On the sidelines of the event, Park Jin-hyo talks with his Chinese counterpart. President Yoon pledges intensive spending cuts in the public sector to solve national debt issues. A major fiscal reform is planned. Boris Johnson steps down from his post as Tory leader. This comes after he faced great criticism with a slew of politicians resigning.
Hello and welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let's begin with our top story. Foreign ministers of South Korea and China sat down for talks on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Indonesia. The duo agreed to cooperate to move forward, especially in light of freedom, human rights, and international coordination. Kim Dami starts us off.
A friendship rooted in mutual respect and development that's based on universal values and principles. That's the kind of Seoul-Beijing relations that South Korea's top diplomat voiced hope for while speaking to his Chinese counterpart for the first time in Bali on Thursday. He said the new government values the universal principles and norms of the international community and will seek an active role in international cooperation to protect freedom, peace, human rights, and justice. Such an emphasis on cooperative for human rights and rule of law reflects Park's intention to change South Korea's diplomatic policy on China. Park was also expected to ask China once again to play its role in stopping North Korea from conducting nuclear tests. The Chinese foreign minister said that his country sees a great importance in the fact that the launch of a new South Korean government is the start of a new journey in Seoul-Beijing relations. While pointing out challenges the two sides need to tackle together, the Chinese diplomat noted Beijing is ready to cooperate with Seoul so that the two countries can stay as good neighbors and the friendly relationship can continue to develop. He also expressed his willingness to move forward so that the strategic cooperative partnership can grow for greater benefit, a move which can be seen as Beijing's message to Seoul that it should not side too much with Washington. The G20 summit will continue into Friday with a trilateral meeting between the top diplomats of South Korea, the U.S., and Japan. That will mark South Korean foreign ministers' first face-to-face group meeting with Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Foreign Minister Yoshimasa Hayashi, another trilateral move to beef up their security cooperation amid Pyongyang's latest nuclear threats. Earlier on Thursday, Park also spoke with Josep Borrell Fontellas, EU High Representative for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy on South Korea-EU relations and Korean Peninsula issues, reaffirming the two-side strategic partnership that was first secured since 2010. During the MIGTA foreign ministers meeting, he also discussed the Ukraine situation as well as food security. Kim Dami, Arirang News.
Years of spending to fight the pandemic and prop up the economy have weakened the government's fiscal health. The Yoon administration is looking to adopt some belt-tightening measures, likely making a huge shift from the previous government. Yoon Jung-min outlines what to expect.
The government needs to tighten its belt first, as it should lead by example. Key message from President Yoon Thursday at his first financial strategy meeting as his administration faces a national debt soaring at an alarming pace.
정부는 성역 없는 고강도 지출 구조 조정으로 국민들의 혈세가 허투루 사용되지 않도록 해야 합니다. 절약한 재원은 꼭 필요한데 써야 합니다.
As the president raised alarm on the nation's fiscal health, saying state coffers have dramatically deteriorated in the last 5 years, the new Yoon administration unveiled a 5-year plan to manage state finances, a policy shift from years of expansionary fiscal policy. Various COVID-19 economic stimulus, such as cash handouts, had led South Korea's debt-to-GDP ratio to increase to 50% this year from 36% in 2017. According to the new plan, the government will normalize COVID-19 related spendings, sell off unnecessary assets held by public enterprises, and more strictly manage its employment quota and salary.
취약계층이 이 어려운 경제 위기를 잘 극복할 수 있도록 공공부문을 긴축해서 조성된 자금으로 이분들을 더 두텁게 지원해야 합니다.
He also called on the need to watch out for possible adverse effects of government finances on the markets, meaning higher interest rates may undermine private investments. For the very first time, the National Finance Strategy meeting took place at a local university in central South Korea, not at a government complex, and invited business leaders from various fields such as the chief producer of SM Entertainment and young college students. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
The government is looking to keep the debt to GDP ratio in the mid-50% range, the fiscal deficit at the pre-pandemic level of 3%. Jung has more on the policy plan.
Mid-50% by 2027. It's debt to GDP ratio, that is. South Korea is tightening its belt and reducing government spending to slow a rise in debt to keep the debt to GDP rate at that in the next 5 years. Seoul's finance ministry said it'll also cut the ratio of fiscal deficit to GDP to 3% or lower from about 5% set for this year as it released the new administration's fiscal policy plan on Thursday.
The biggest difference from the previous administrations is that we are using the managed fiscal balance to set the limit instead of the total fiscal balance. Also, the fiscal rule will be simplified, so it's more like what other advanced countries use.
The move marks a departure from the expansionary fiscal policy that the previous administration had maintained over the past few years in a bid to prop up economic growth and cope with the fallout of the COVID-19 pandemic. Also, one of the major reforms will be in education as the number of young students are falling. Rather than elementary and middle schools, there'll be more financial grants allocated to high schools and universities. The government announced its investment strategy to increase efficiency and encourage private sector-led investment. For investment in R&D, it's going to focus on strategic areas essential to national and economic security. For small and medium companies, rather than giving out small amounts of support to all businesses, money will be allocated based on market demand. Also, the government will abolish any unnecessary regulations on them. There'll also be more support and deregulation for universities to bring in students and training to create jobs to cultivate more professionals in key high-tech industries. The government will prepare a new fiscal rule based on the plan by early September and put into effect as soon as the legislation process is complete in Parliament. 엄지영, Arirang News.
A state-run think tank says South Korea's economy is recovering thanks to a rebound in the service sector. This comes as ease distancing measures increase related activities. However, the pace has been limited due to geopolitical uncertainties. Shin Se-byuk helps us look beyond the numbers.
South Korea's economy continues to recover thanks to eased COVID-19 measures, but does so at a limited pace due to external factors. According to the Korea Development Institute on Thursday, South Korea is seeing improvement on the back of growth in in-person services such as accommodation and transport. Data shows that service output in May increased 7.5% from the previous month. In particular, recreation saw the highest month-on-month growth at 31.9%, followed by accommodation and food services at 20.5%. This also aided employment recovery. In May, the number of people in employment increased by 70,000 from the same month last year, and around a third of them came from the service industry, largely led by a revival of business in accommodation or food. But despite positive figures in the service sector, recovery momentum is weakening in manufacturing due to geopolitical uncertainties, such as the war in Ukraine and tightening monetary policies in major economies. In May, all industry production rose 7.1% from April, but growth reported in semiconductor and electronic parts industries slowed the pace. Electronic parts decreased by 13.8%, and chips were down by 1.7%. Meanwhile, citing projected rate hikes by the U.S. and the Eurozone in July, the KDI has painted a grim picture of the global economic outlook. One expert said such rate hikes may hinder the economy further.
Higher interest rates mean that consumption has a higher opportunity cost. This makes people spend less. But the problem here is that this will also lead to higher production costs, and consumers will eventually see higher sticker prices.
Amid increasing expectation that the Bank of Korea may take a big step hike of 50 basis points this month, the experts added the recovery will be limited for a while unless the geopolitical instability settles. 신새벽 아리랑 뉴스.
Samsung Electronics estimates its Q2 sales and operating profits to rise sharply, mainly thanks to the tech giant semiconductors. LG Electronics saw encouraging figures driven by a rise in the auto parts business. Here's Lee-Jun with a breakdown of the digits.
Despite ongoing geopolitical issues and global inflation, Samsung Electronics has logged its highest ever projected sales for the second quarter. In an earnings guidance report released on Thursday, the company says sales estimates from April to June amount to a record $58.9 billion, up almost 21% from the same period last year. The tech giant also expects an 11.3% on-year increase in operating profit, amounting to roughly $10.7 billion. This would mark the company's third highest second quarter profits ever. Analysts say the earnings were largely driven by operating profits from Samsung's semiconductor business and expect the company's profits for semiconductors to stand at around $7.6 billion. A high $1 exchange rate also appears to be contributing to earnings. For example, in the first quarter, the $1 exchange rate rose almost 2% compared to the previous quarter, which brought profits of some $229 million. The exchange rate is expected to also result in $635 million in operating profits in the second quarter. One analyst says he has a positive outlook for Samsung's sales in the third quarter.
Despite falling DRAM chip prices, Samsung's sales in the third quarter will increase as display sales recover and a new foldable phone is set to be released during the period. But operating profits are likely to remain due to a drop in chip prices.
LG Electronics also posted sales far better than the market consensus. It projected a rise in quarterly sales of a little over $15 billion, an increase of 15% compared to the same period a year earlier. This is largely driven by a sales rise in LG's auto parts. However, the estimated operating profit came to a record of about $610 million, which is down over 12% on year. Industry insiders say this is caused by a drop in TV sales and a rising cost of logistics and raw materials. Lee Jun-seok, Arirang News.
Minutes from the Fed's open market meeting are released. They indicate officials are committed to getting inflation down, possibly with another rate hike this month. Kim Yo-sun fills us in.
Federal Reserve officials emphasized in June that they need to fight inflation, even if it means slowing an economy that already appears on the brink of a recession. That's according to minutes released from a Federal Open Market Committee meeting held in mid-June, where officials raised interest rates by 0.75 percentage point and the biggest hike since 1994. The minutes released Wednesday also show the policymakers decided that a further increase of 50 or 75 basis points would likely be appropriate at the July meeting, on top of the hike approved the previous month. They said that their decision to raise interest rates in June was necessary to control cost of living increases running at their highest levels since 1981. Central bankers stressed they will continue to do so until inflation gets close to their long-term goal of 2%. The document said that the officials recognize the possibility that an even more restrictive stance could be appropriate if elevated inflation pressures were to persist going forward. Following the publication of the minutes, traders on Wall Street put a seesaw day behind them to close higher on Wednesday, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average up by 0.23%. Kim Yo-sun, Arirang News.
Back here in the nation, People Power Party's Independent Ethics Committee is reviewing its chair Lee Jun-seok on a possible discipline action over sexual bribery allegation. With a police investigation underway, the focal point is an alleged attempt by Lee to cover up evidence and whether any such attempt was harmful to the ruling bloc as a whole. Ahead of the meeting, the committee's chair emphasized their decision will be made independent from any internal political influence, and the decision will likely be drawn by the end of the day. He, who maintains his innocence, has previously said any punishment will not be acceptable, not even the lightest warning. In case of suspension or expulsion, the PPP will likely elect a new chair, as Lee's term is set to end next June. Over in the UK, Boris Johnson announced his resignation as leader of the Conservative Party. The announcement comes following a wave of resignations from government ministers that has nearly paralyzed the country. Johnson addressed the public, saying he is sad to leave his post.
To you, the British public, I know that there will be many people who are relieved, and perhaps quite a few who will also be disappointed. And I want you to know how sad I am to be giving up the best job in the world.
Johnson was criticized for a number of issues, including his handling of Brexit, Partygate, and the resignation of an official who was recently accused of groping two men. He vows to continue serving as PM until a new leader is chosen. Elsewhere around the world, residents in Donetsk have been told to evacuate as Russia continues to intensify its offensive in eastern Ukraine. The war has now forced close to 9 million people to leave the country. Choi Min-jung has the latest.
Russian forces are inching closer to capturing eastern Ukraine. The country is on high alert as Russia pushes toward the Donetsk region after taking much of neighboring Luhansk. However, regional military authorities said Wednesday that fighting is still ongoing on the outskirts of Luhansk and that Ukraine still controls 45% of Donetsk. Officials have urged any residents of Donetsk who remain in the area to evacuate. Meanwhile, during Wednesday's nightly address, President Volodymyr Zelensky said the weapons Ukraine has received from the West have helped with successful strikes on areas that are important to Russia's logistics.
Finally, it is felt that the Western artillery, the weapons we receive from our partners, started working very powerfully. Their accuracy is exactly as needed. The losses of the occupiers will only increase every week, as will the difficulty of supplying them.
The nearly 5-month-long war has led to millions of refugees. According to the UN Refugee Agency, more than 8.7 million people have crossed borders since the onset of war. Pundits forecast this figure to hit the 9 million mark in the near future, as strikes are expected to intensify in the Donetsk region. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
The EU recognized nuclear energy and gas as environmentally sustainable energy sources. The decision came on Wednesday as the EU Parliament voted to include the two sources in the EU taxonomy, a list of economic activities deemed green. Seoul's Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy forecast the decision would boost the nation's nuclear energy exports. In line with the bloc's decision, South Korea plans to revise the Korean taxonomy by including nuclear power as well. The draft will be made in the coming weeks. Last month, South Korea lifted restrictions on the number of international flights coming in and out of the country. This has led to a dramatic increase in passengers. Kim Do-yeon sheds light on the recovery process.
A month since the international flight restrictions were lifted, and it's bustling at the nation's main airway, Incheon International Airport. The South Korean government last month decided to lift restrictions on the number of international flights and the airport's operation hours. In fact, about a month ago, when airline restrictions were still in effect, the number of passengers flying out of South Korea stood at around 14,000 per day. At the end of June, the number jumped to nearly 24,000. Across the whole month of June, the number of international passengers surpassed 1.2 million. While when the pandemic began in 2020, it was less than 200,000. So where are they headed?
Taking into account the bookings for this July, Da Nang in Vietnam is the most popular destination. Following that are Guam and some Western European countries.
Incheon Airport expected the number of international flight passengers to rise continuously and by the end of the year be 75% of the pre-pandemic levels. Airlines are also gearing up to meet demand.
With the rise in demand of international travel following the lifting of COVID-19 restrictions, Asiana will increase flights by 25% compared to last month.
On the other hand, the travel industry is saying the recovery process could be stymied due to high inflation in and out of the country. On top of that, flight prices have been soaring due to the rising oil prices. As for the COVID-19 measures, incoming passengers still have to be tested for the virus prior to departing their country of departure. But even before going through passport control, inbound travelers are able to scan a QR code to show proof of their negative test instead of having to wait in line. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
The annual Yorak Festival that features traditional Korean music is back. With COVID-19 restrictions lifted, they no longer need to hold it online or to a much smaller audience. This time it's on through the month with different performances each week. Kim Hyun-sung provides a sneak peek.
Now that most COVID-19 curbs have been lifted, Yorak Festival has also come back in its full form, presenting Korean traditional music in the most exciting and creative way. This year's Yorak Festival defines itself by 3 keywords: extend, explode, and expand.
I wanted to create a stage where artists can spread their pent-up artistic energy. These energies could extend, explode, and expand. Yorak is where it's all going to happen.
Wednesday's performance was called 4 Dots, performed by Team Rimaidus and Tarum. 4 dots represent the 4 string musicians who harmoniously come together to play their original music.
Komungo is called the top of all instruments. It really is, because it's grand, masculine, but also gender neutral and fitting to this era's female figure. I'm looking forward to all the wonderful colors that will be expressed through this instrument.
If the Rimaidus team who play Komungo are yang, us in the Tarum team who play Kayagum are yin. Those who watch this performance will be able to feel the harmonious balance of yin and yang.
Those who missed Wednesday's performance need not worry. Other shows are scheduled until the 23rd of July, and no 2 performances are the same. For example, on July 20th and 21st, an orchestra will play traditional tunes in jazz form. And for overseas music fans, the festival is coming to the UK this October. The festival is going to be extending its music to foreign fans, exploding in excitement, and expanding its musical influence to the world. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
The 19th Seoul International Dance Competition is now on, taking place at Mapo Art Center's Art Hall. The competition has 4 categories: ballet, contemporary dance, ethnic dance, and choreography. It first began in 2004 and continued even during the pandemic with non-face-to-face preliminary screenings. 844 contestants from 16 countries are participating. They will be divided into 2 groups. A prize of $10,000 will be awarded to the Grand Prix winner who participates on-site. Miko Nisinen, the Boston Ballet Artistic Director, chairs the jury.
Monsoon rain has returned and showers will spread nationwide overnight. This round of rainfall will be concentrated across northern central regions. Northern Gyeonggi-do and Gangwon-do provinces will see heavy downpours of up to 150 millimeters. The Chungcheong-do provinces and parts of the south will see up to 80 millimeters. Extreme heat is persisting nationwide despite the cold showers. Today, maximum temperatures in Jeju Island peaked at 35.9 degrees Celsius. This is the highest temperature recorded for early July in 51 years. Expect tropical nights to continue for most parts of the country with nighttime lows of 25 degrees or more. With increased humidity levels, temperatures may feel hotter than the actual readings. The entire nation will have a rainy morning. Lows in Seoul and Busan will be kicking off at 25 degrees Celsius. As for the daily highs, Seoul will be reaching 29 degrees, Daejeon 32, Chuncheon and Busan will reach 30 degrees Celsius. Showers will take a brief respite this weekend. Another round of monsoon rain is in the forecast early next week. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
It's time to wrap things up. As always, thank you for staying with us.